Legend has it, as we jump into today's message, that hunters had this ancient way of catching monkeys. And you may have heard this before. But what they would do is they'd take a coconut and they'd cut a small hole in it, about the size that an average size monkey, I don't know what that is, but an average size monkey could get his hand into that coconut. And then they would hollow that coconut out and they would nail it to a tree. And then they would set the trap by putting bananas inside that coconut. And so along comes the monkey, and he sees that there are bananas inside of that coconut shell, and he maneuvers his hand. It's just big enough for him to work his hand into that coconut, and he grabs hold of the bananas. And at that moment, the hunter just simply walks out, starts walking towards the monkey. Now, the monkey can't get out of the trap because his fist is balled up around the banana, and with a fist, he can't get his hand out. He would have to let go of the banana to get his hand out of the hole. But he won't. He sees that hunter coming, but he will not let go of the banana. And most monkeys will stay trapped and will eventually be captured by that hunter. There's a scripture I came across this week. As I was reading it, I thought about that story, that illustration. It's Luke chapter 9, verses 23 through 25. Jesus is talking to a group of people, and he said to them all, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet lose or forfeit their very self?" And I just want to start today off asking this simple question. I wonder how many of us are caught in a monkey trap, and we don't even realize that all we have to do is let go. I wonder how many of us that describes right now. I wonder how many of us can think about, man, that might be me. We're going through this series, Soul Strength. And we're kind of wrapping it up. This week and next week, I'm going to be wrapping this series up, Soul Strength. And what we've been talking about week in and week out for the last couple of months now is these different rhythms that we can apply to our lives. These aren't things we do to earn salvation. We don't earn that. That's a free gift from God. But once we've come to salvation, the expectation is that we experience growth, that we are transformed by the Spirit of God, that we become more and more like Jesus as we follow him. And that happens when we allow for these rhythms to begin in our life, these places where God begins to come. His Holy Spirit comes into our life and begins transforming, begins changing us. And these different, sometimes we call them spiritual disciplines, sometimes we call them spiritual habits, but these spaces that we create and that we begin to practice in our daily lives. Like I said a minute ago, we don't practice them to impress God or to earn any kind of salvation. We practice them because that's where God works. That's where he works in us. That's where he works through us. And today, I want to talk, and we've talked a little bit about this recently, but I want to talk about it some more today, is the title, Finishing with Blessing. Transition. Think about that word, what it means to transition. The changes that come with transitions are hard, aren't they? Even when things are going badly in our lives, we tend to resist the changes that are needed to move on to something new, to something hopefully better. I wonder how many people have sat in a job. They've had a job and maybe they didn't like the job, maybe they didn't like their boss, they didn't have a very good boss or something, but they sat in that job and there was a part of them that knew they needed to make a change if they ever wanted the situation to improve, but they wouldn't do it. And there could be all kinds of reasons for why you never make that change. You don't take that leap because transitions are hard. Maybe it's because you really like having a paycheck. I mean, that's a big deal, right? But maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's you realize that, well, whatever's next could be worse, and that scares you. Maybe it's just that enduring what you know is better than stepping into something new and different that you don't know. Transitions are hard. We experience it in relationships. I see people, especially when they're dating and when they're younger, I see it throughout all stages of life, in dating relationships or in friendships. People realize this friendship is toxic. This friendship is not good for me. This is leading me down some bad paths. But for some of the same reasons, you don't ever make the change that you know you need to make. Moving into a new house or to a new city. I like to watch HGTV, Love It or List It. How many of you have seen that show? Love It or I like that show. And so I'll sit and watch Love It or List It. And the whole premise of the show is that they have this house that one member of the couple really loves the house and the other's tired of it and ready to move. And so they have one person, part of the show, that comes in to renovate the house, while the other guy's a real estate agent, and he goes and tries to find them the perfect house. And at the end, they come in and they see the renovation, and they decide, do we want to love the house and stay here, or do we want to list it and move to a new house? And it's surprising to me how often a renovated kitchen and some paint leads to them deciding, oh, well, this house is actually perfect now. We'll stay here. You know, and it's funny to me because so often I'm like, that house he found you was way better, but they want to stay. Why? Why do they do that? Because change is hard. We resist change. We just do. We see it in the church. Nothing will divide a loving church faster than changing a few things. Even when the changes are needed, even when the changes are good, it happens. Why? Because change is always hard. It just is. But here's the tension. Even though change is hard, even though change can create all kinds of problems, change is absolutely necessary. Growth and transformation do not and cannot happen without change. Guys, the essence, think about this. The essence of the Gospels, of the gospel story, the good news about Jesus, is focused on change and transformation. We throw out the verse, Matthew 4:19, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Go ahead and show that one. Follow me, and this is one we talk about all the time. Follow me and I'll make you fishers of people. It's a call to becoming a disciple of Jesus. But look at the statement. It's all about change. It's all about transformation. It's about being called by Jesus to come into a new life, something different. I think about Ephesians chapter 4, verses 22 to 24. It says, you were taught, Paul writes this, you were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. And guys, this is what I want you to think about for a minute. The only way for a new season to begin is for the previous season to end. And we've got to think about that for a minute. Guys, it's true. When a person moves from childhood to adulthood, you must change, and you must leave an old season to move into a new one. You got to quit your old job before you can begin a new one. Marriage marks a transition from the single life to a committed union of two lives. Parents struggle all the time to transition from raising their children at home to supporting them when they leave home. It's true, guys, as well, when we move from being the Lord of our own lives to submitting ourselves to Jesus and being transformed by His Holy Spirit. In other words, I've got to say it this way. We cannot take pride in our old way of living and step into a saving and transforming relationship with Jesus at the same time. We must be open and willing to be changed. We must leave one way of living behind to begin a new way of living. And then we must be determined. Once we've made that decision, that choice to begin this new life, we've got to make the decision to be determined to finish well in the life that we have chosen. And that is really what I want to talk about today and focus on. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, German theologian back in the time of World War II, around Nazi Germany, stood up to Hitler, wrote a book called The Cost of Discipleship. And he wanted to be clear to people. If you decide to follow Jesus, that comes at a cost. Yes, salvation is a free gift, but following Jesus is very costly because you're called to change. You're not called to stay the same way you were when you came to Him. You're called to transform, to be changed, to allow His Spirit to change you. It's costly. It's hard because we resist change. Jesus says it this way in Luke chapter 14, verses 26 and 27. And these are hard words, but listen to what he's saying. He said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person can't be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Who can do that? I mean, who's going to say, well, I hate my family, I hate my own life, and I have to do all that so I can follow Jesus? But understand what Jesus is saying here. He's saying, listen, compared to the rest of this world, what I have to offer is so much better. There's a parable, if you will, about a rich man who dies. And he's on his way to heaven, and he's got a U-Haul hooked up to his car. And it's got all his rich, good stuff, all the best stuff in the world that he's accumulated in his life. And it's in this U-Haul, and he's driving up to the pearly gates of heaven. And that's when St. Peter meets him out front. Now he notices as he's pulling up to the gates, all these other trailers and trucks and stuff with stuff that's just scattered all over the ground, that's been left behind and discarded. And he got to look at it and said, some of this is really nice stuff. And that's when Peter calls him over and he says, come here. I want you to look inside. And he walks him over to the gates and he peers inside the gates of heaven. And that's when it hits him. Compared to that, everything in that trailer is junk. And he just walks away and leaves it all behind. And guys, I wonder how many of us are looking at the things here from our view right here on earth, and we start saying, well, following Jesus, man, that sure is going to cost a lot. I don't know if I can do that. And Jesus is simply saying, if you will follow me, if you will one day be willing to take the view that I'm about to give you, you'll realize how everything else is just junk. See, the problem is, I'll say this, as a pastor, one of the things that's most distressing to me in working with people is when I see someone who starts the journey as a follower of Jesus but doesn't finish well. I think about the words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew chapter 7, and he simply says this. He says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons and perform many miracles? And I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoer. Guys, the biggest reason I think people fall away and don't finish well, the reason I think we see that happen in people's lives, and maybe you're struggling with this right now, is we don't count the cost. We don't pay attention that it's going to cost us something here. They didn't consider what it really means to follow Jesus, to really surrender their life to him, to embrace the change and the transformation that comes from ending one season of life so that you can begin a new one. I think a lot of us just get caught in the monkey trap and we won't let go. I guess the question I want to ask you, have you thinking about today is this: what does finishing well look like for you right now? What would finishing well in life, and what is finishing well in anything you try to accomplish? What does that look like for you? Well, Jesus, in that passage I read a minute ago, where Jesus says, if you want to follow me and be my disciple, you must hate father, mother, brother, sister, spouse, your own life. He goes on. He kind of goes on to explain it a little bit in these next few verses. And I want to use these verses today as just kind of a place to start thinking. What does it mean? What does it look like to finish well? And look at what Jesus has to say here. It's back in Luke chapter 14, starting in verse 28. And it says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and you're not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he's not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off. He'll ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciple. He's saying, because everything here, you're going to try to hang on to it, and it's just a trap. It's just a trap. Today, I just want to give you two thoughts about what finishing well looks like. And the first one is this: completing your special assignment is just as important as accepting your special assignment. Big picture. Follow me and I will make you fishers of men, right? Follow me. Answer that call. And I know many of you in this room have answered the call. Jesus says, come follow me. But I'm going to tell you this. If you haven't already done this next step, I'm challenging you to do so today. Take time to examine what it really means to be a follower of Jesus, what it really means to take up your cross, what it really means to let go of the banana so you can get out of the trap. Are you willing to truly put your faith and your trust into the life that Jesus offers you? A life that is better and more fulfilling than any life that you can build for yourself. You see, accepting the call to follow Jesus isn't the end of the journey, it's the beginning. And from there, Jesus is going to transform you. He's going to transform your life into what he always intended it to be, if you let him. It's not to say having things is bad. It's not to say that if you give your life to Jesus, that he's necessarily going to tell you you've got to get rid of everything so you can be a follower of Jesus. That's not the point. The question is, are you willing? Are you just willing to trust him to whatever it is he calls you to? That's the question. That if he says, let go of the banana, whatever that is for you, are you willing to do it? Or are you going to hang on to it as if it's the best thing? Completely ignoring the fact that maybe he has something, putting faith and trust in the promise that he has something that is so much better. If he says, just let it go and follow me, that's what it means to pick up your cross. That's when we start to follow him. You see, the call to follow Jesus is not just about accepting the call, it's about being changed and transformed from that day forward. It's about ultimately finishing the journey well. That's the big picture of the call. Accepting the special assignment versus finishing, completing the big assignment. But I want you to think about it daily, in your daily life as well. When we answer the call to follow Jesus, we're answering the call to open our eyes every day to the special assignments he puts in front of us. The special assignments that God puts in your path. Sometimes they're as simple as having a conversation or a prayer with someone. But sometimes those assignments are hard. Sometimes they're life-changing. Accepting the assignment is important every day. But finishing the assignment is equally important, because that's where we're transformed as we go through that process. The second thing, and this is the second thing I want to give you, simply this. If you want to think about what it looks like to finish well, embrace your next bigger yes. Last week we talked about those special assignments that we're willing to open our eyes in. But today I want to challenge you to think about this. No matter what stage of life you were in, no matter what your struggles are, no matter where you are, young or old, sick or healthy, whatever that looks like, rich or poor, what's your next bigger yes? Comedian George Burns died at the age of 99. And shortly before he passed, he wrote these words. He said, there's an old saying, life begins at 40. That's silly. Life begins every morning when you wake up. Open your mind to it. Don't just sit there. Do things. The possibilities are endless. The point is, with a good, positive attitude and a little bit of luck, there's no reason why you can't live to be 100. And once you've done that, you've really got it made, because very few people die over 100. Consider the cost of following Jesus. It really does mean that we're willing to wake up each day and seek out or live out the special assignments, the bigger yeses that God puts in front of us. The bigger yes of answering his call, building his kingdom, loving our neighbors, sharing his love with anyone and everyone we can, giving when we can, being thankful for what we have, using our experiences and the strength of the Holy Spirit to make a difference in other people's lives. But the truth is this, guys, you are never too young to accept the special assignment that God puts in front of you. You're never too old to accept that special assignment. You're never too sick or too busy or too distracted or too inexperienced or too angry or too frustrated or too rich or too poor. Following Jesus means you're ready to let go of the banana so you can escape the monkey trap and follow him. That's how you can make sure that you're not just starting well, but that you will finish well too. You guys have heard me talk about Bill Carrington some. Passed away now a couple years ago, but I remember when Bill was diagnosed with his cancer. I remember when he was told that surgery would not be an option. You see, Bill, I think one thing that really captures my heart and mind about my relationship and friendship with Bill over the years was that he had given his life to ministry. He had served the church his whole life as an elder, as a pastor at one time. He had dedicated himself to being a godly and loving husband and father and grandfather. And up to the point of his diagnosis, he had accepted his assignment as a follower of Jesus well. But as Bill faced a terminal diagnosis, he could have handled that in a lot of different ways. He could have been angry that he wasn't going to get to watch his grandbabies grow up. He could have been disappointed that his time on earth was drawing to an end, even though there was so much more he wanted to accomplish. He could have decided that the pain that he was going through with the cancer was reason enough for him to seek comfort and peace for his remaining days. All of those would have been very natural emotions and responses. I don't think anybody would have faulted him for feeling any of those ways. But what did Bill do? One day Bill called me. He asked me to come over to his house, and when I did, he told me that he had a plan. He wanted me to help him print out some business cards that he wanted to start carrying around with him everywhere he went to give to people. I don't remember the exact wording on the cards, but the idea was he simply wanted to give these cards to people to prompt the question if they knew just how much Jesus loved them. And from that point, he wanted to tell every person who would listen about Jesus, about salvation, the salvation that comes through him. And I gotta say, Bill didn't just have a plan. That's what he did. He did that. Bill had one more special assignment. He had one more bigger yes. His last days on earth were not about comfort and rest. He knew that he was going to get all the comfort and rest that he would ever want once he got to heaven. Bill's last days were about telling as many people about Jesus as he could until his faith became sight. He didn't want his story to be about how well he started his journey with Jesus. He wanted it to be about how he finished his journey with Jesus. Guys, your story will be remembered not for how sincerely you started, but for how well you finished. The best definition that I've heard for what it really means to finish well is this. To finish well means that I want to be more in love with Jesus at the end than I was at the beginning. Let that drive you.